Viewer discretion is advised.
Well, welcome back to Win the Night podcast. I am your host, Josh Lopez, and tonight I have another one of my friends from middle school. I want to say high school. I lied.
Yep.
Please introduce yourself.
Hello, David Martinez. Went to high school with Josh. Went to high school at Jacob Freudinger, homie of the show, David. So here I am out here.
Love it, man. Thanks for coming on and making time. I really appreciate it. And one thing that I know that we talked about a little bit beforehand was, you did spend some time in the military, and we will get into that a little bit later. But before we do, I always like to really reel it back to, go on a time capsule and go back to childhood. What was it like being young? Because when we met in high school, like, we already knew you as like the funny Dave, the guy that we could do comedy sketches with. I mean, when we started doing comedy sketches, it was with you. Literally. So like, what was childhood like for you?
Man, childhood, well, definitely not the Oak Forest suburbs, the south suburbs.
Yeah.
I'm from Bridgeport originally.
Okay.
So south side of Chicago. Grew up on 29th and Halstead, right on Quinn Street. Loved it. Loved every second of it. I'm a city kid, still am. Live in the burbs now, but love the city growing up. So many different cultures, so many different types of people. A real sense of community, like, truly being able to call yourself a Chicagoan and having just like, I would say like your more than like exciting encounters that you would have growing up in the city. Loved it.
And so what, were you an only child? Do you have siblings?
I do have siblings. I have 4 siblings. We're all pretty spaced out in age. So I just turned 28 last weekend. My sister, she's 21, and then I have 3 younger brothers. They're 15, 14, and 13.
Wow, that's a decent.
And all of our names start with the letter D.
Is there anything to that?
Nah, my mom just rolled with that.
Oh, okay.
Just rolled with that.
All right, sweet. Well,
liked it, kept it going.
What, if you don't mind me asking, what are the names?
Dakota, Donovan, Damon, and Devin.
That rolls.
It does.
I see. Okay.
Good
so
choices.
she was on to something.
She was.
And so what is your relationship like with your siblings growing up?
I would say it was fine. I mean, my sister and we talked a little bit more. I mean, when you have such a big age gap, I think, and especially I was there for my brothers when they were kind of growing up, like up until they were about like 6 or 7, around that age, like the oldest Donovan, he was probably 7. When I moved in 8th grade to go live with my dad because we have separate dads. So I wasn't really around them during those like late middle school years, high school years when I was in the military and all that. So, right now, talk to them a little bit more, I would say, than when I was younger. But yeah, I mean, we're all cool. We all know we're siblings and stuff. We got each other's backs, giving them some life lessons, all that kind of stuff.
So, it's just obviously life kind of happens. And so then you just didn't have as much contact while you were in the Army, obviously. That makes sense. I mean, you're
Definitely.
not home. And so then, did you really get to have that older brother role? Because when I was younger, I had a pretty good age gap with my older brothers as well. And so there was always this thing of like, the older brother has the protector role, right? It's an unspoken rule in my family. But even if my older siblings didn't want to do it, like, it was like, oh, to step in for this guy again. Yeah. Like, they still did it, right? And so what was it like for you? Did you ever have to step in like that as an older brother for your siblings?
Man, to be honest, I mean, when I was a little bit younger, not as much. I feel like I'm more in that role kind of now, like teaching my brothers, like, hey, maybe not steal cologne from the same place twice, or something like that. Like, they're gonna catch on to you, like I'd say I'm more in that role now. When I was younger, just not really. I think when I was like, more in that, like, what your typical older brother, like high school, you got the younger siblings and all that stuff. I was just Oak Forest, and then like back home in Chicago just felt like 2 completely different worlds. And like, most of the time when I was back in Chicago, like kind of the same as when I was younger, wasn't really at home a lot. I was always out in the streets, hanging out with my friends, riding ripsticks around, just having a good time. So obviously they knew I was there for them, if they needed me. But they were always just kind of doing their own thing.
More independent.
I mean? Yeah.
I get you.
I feel like a lot of us are kind of that way. Like, we all have kind of different personalities, like I would say extremely different. And, you know, we love each other and we acknowledge the fact that we're different. It's just like, you know, we don't talk as much as I guess you could say like your typical family, I guess you could say.
What was it like for you in Chicago? What ended up being the reason you moved?
In Bridgeport, you could say it's a lot of like it's a big Asian community out there. You're so close to Chinatown. And then you have a lot of your like immigrant, like white families, Italian, Polish,
Sure,
all of them. And growing up, my next door neighbor, he was Chinese, and like I was always hanging out with him. Growing up. His name was Raymond. Still keep in touch a little bit today, but yeah, hanging out with him, hanging out with his friends from like, you know, a couple of the schools and stuff out there. I went to Catholic school growing up, and it was never really my thing. I was always real kind of like rebellious, you know, didn't really hang out with a lot of kids from there. I was always hanging out with kids who more so went to like the public schools and just kind of absorbing like their culture and kind of like things outside of like what I was living in my day to day was always really exciting. So definitely a lot of time just hanging out at the park, playing basketball, you know, taking the CTA all over the city. Me and my friends, we would just hop on the CTA, a random colored line, and be like, hey, let's go to this park and play basketball, and then play basketball against the other kids there or something like that. Just, it's a good time. It's a good time, definitely.
What drew you to going out and like talking to people and like having these adventures? Like what was there an instance where like a friend introduced you to that lot, to going out and having fun that way? Like what was it that brought you out?
When I was an only child for quite some time.
Okay.
You know, I think we had my sister around like when I was in like 3rd or 4th grade, something like that. So my mom, we had just moved into our house on Quinn Street when I was like 3 years old. And my mom, like, we had the park right down the street, McGuane Park. Back in the day, always something going on, summer league baseball, you know, something going on, and just meeting kids from the neighborhood. Like, I loved being out there and experiencing that. And my mom, like, always made it a point, like, she didn't want me to just know, like, what was going on in, like, the confines of our home. Like, she wanted me to really, like, grow and just, like, experience life and, like, everything that comes with it. And in my opinion, like, being a kid, there's no better place to do that than in the city of Chicago, where you have some of the best food, some of the best places to just go see, like, walk up a hill and go see the city skyline, or walk by Lake Michigan, and, you know, you got these beaches there right there in the city. Like, I was just so drawn to it. I was so drawn to that heartbeat of the city.
And so it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, your mom pushed you to go out and explore. Is that correct?
Definitely. I mean, my mom, like, she was around, you know what I mean? She was working a lot back in the day, definitely, still does. But I never felt like she necessarily wasn't there. I always just, like, was kind of out and about, you know, just living my life. And she knew that, like, school wasn't really, like, you know, the most fun thing for me. I wasn't really into, you know, Catholic school or anything like that. And just being able to kind of step outside of that and have some fun, it was really dope.
That's really cool. I'm glad that, so she kind of got out of your way a little bit to let you explore.
Oh, definitely.
With your experience living in Oak Forest and in Chicago, what are the pros and cons to both?
That's a tough one, because my experience was so different in most. Like, I didn't go to Catholic school, like, out there in Oak Forest, mainly just, like, public school and stuff like that. Back home in Chicago, like, especially growing up, like, in the early 2000s and stuff, backwards thinking, you know, I guess kind of that more, like, Republican mindset,
Sure,
you could say, back in the day. So I always kind of had that rift, you know, back at home. Like, I feel like that's why I was always out in the streets and, like, experiencing culture and stuff like that, because I just never really had those same views. Moving into the south suburbs, you know, with my dad and stuff, who he was around when I was younger, but I didn't really know him. And especially growing up in Chicago, I was kind of rebellious, like I said, going against the grain, wasn't really a fan of school or nothing like that. I'm 13 when I'm moving in. Like, bro, you're not telling me what to do. Like, I'm doing me. I've been doing me. And we clashed a little bit. We have a great relationship now. But I would say just switching between those two different households and, like, those two different styles of parenting, that was the big difference.
And you mentioned a little bit about your dad being kind of more the authoritative, or at least tried to be more authoritative. Yeah. What were the challenges for you there?
Challenges? A lot, definitely. like I said, my dad's a good guy. Worked really hard his entire life, worked on the railroads, started at the bottom working in the rail yards. Now he's the director of health and safety for one of the stations downtown. Like, he's really come a long way, but him and my mom, they got together. They were together for a little bit, never got married or anything like that. And, my mom was always kind of tied down to things back at home, wasn't ready to like kind of start her own life, like out on her own. And my dad, he wanted that, very similar to me, I guess you could say, growing up. Like, I was always looking to kind of pave my own path and create my own story, so moving in with him, it was just kind of hard. Like, I'm getting to know him, but at the same time, like, he's also trying to like impose like his knowledge and his like, wanting me to be successful. And I wasn't ready for that because I didn't know who this guy really was, didn't know if I could trust him.
He hadn't earned your respect.
Yeah.
What made you move from Chicago with your dad?
So I was getting in trouble a lot at school.
Okay.
Back in the day. Like I said, I was a super rambunctious kid, super, super loud, always talking, you know what I mean? And in Catholic school back in the day, like, even now probably, like, they're very strict, always trying to, have you do things a certain way. And I was especially getting bullied on a little bit back in the day. I was a little bit of a bigger kid, still am. Like, even in my time in the Army, I wasn't the smallest guy in the room, but I did what I had to do, I was always just like not wanting to hang out with the kids there. Going to school every day was like miserable, just like not being around kids who like the same stuff as me. Like, when I was hanging out with like my Asian friends and stuff, we're talking about anime. We're talking about playing Gears of War until 3 a.m., playing Halo,
right?
Doing that kind of stuff, riding our ripsticks. And then at the kids I went to school with, they were more talking about like sports and stuff at the time. And at the time I wasn't really into your normal everyday thing. So I was always kind of that outsider in, and I wanted to kind of switch up and get a new atmosphere going.
I got you. And when did, so Catholic school happened just before you moved over to the suburbs. Am I correct? So then before, when you were talking about your friends with the ones that you went out all the time and did adventures with, that was before Catholic school?
No, that was kind of during.
Oh, that was during.
So like while I was like in middle school and stuff like that, usually the people I was hanging out with were people I met at McGuane Park, friends of my neighbor Raymond and stuff. So just always kind of hitting them up, hanging out on the weekends.
I got you.
During the summer, all that kind of stuff.
Okay. What was the conversation that, hey, you're going to go over here now?
So in 7th grade, I had gotten into this. This was honestly hilarious. Like, looking back on it, like, it was a crazy time. But so in 7th grade, it was towards the end of the school year. And there were these two kids always picking on me. I wasn't much of a fighter back then. I wasn't trying to act all hard. Like, I'm just trying to do me, you know what I mean? And a lot of my homies I did have a small group of homies in the school that I would talk with about, and like, birthday parties, all that kind of stuff. And one day, like, they were just picking on me. I was so tired of it. And my homies were all like, man, David, you got to do something to them, bro. You got to you got to say it's done. And I'm like, you know what? You're right, bro. I went right up to him, dude, in the last class today. I said, hey, we're going to walk down to Armour Square Park, which is right by where the White Sox play baseball.
Sure.
And we're going to fight. And all of us are going to be circled up. No one gets involved, and we're just going to get at it. They were like, oh, fine, dude, fine, let's do it. We go outside, and these kids stop right at the doorway of the school, trying to fight me right there. Sure enough, I'm like, sure, I push one kid into the fence. We start fighting. Security guard comes up and grabs me. I run away. And I look, and I see like a security car pull up, a cop car, and I'm standing at the end of the street. And I see my grandfather there to pick me up, and he goes, is this because of you? Is this because of you? I'm like, yeah. He goes, run home. So I run home. And, I got in trouble with the school and stuff. My dad had to come in. But my parents knew. They weren't stupid. They were like, these kids have been bullying him. He stood up for himself. Like, he got tired of it. And, of course, they're coming at me because their family's really in with the school. And, they've been supporting the school and the church for years, all that kind of stuff. And I just had to sit down and have a conversation with my mom and be like, I love Chicago. I love living here. But I feel like if I want to progress in life, I feel like my dad is going to give me that structure that I need. Because, growing up at home, like, love my mom, but she was, I would say, borderline a hoarder, like, had a lot of just, like, stuff. She was definitely addicted to shopping. And, I just wasn't in an environment where I felt I was like conducive, like to grow to what I needed to be. I felt like I was going to eventually like end up like that. So I was like, I need to move into a situation that I feel like is more set for me. You know, my dad, I'm his only kid. He's got my stepmom, Kim, there with her. I'm the only one. I don't got to worry about my mom and like my younger brothers and my younger sister. I can kind of just focus on myself, go out there for a little bit.
Wow. How old were you? 13?
Yeah. I was in 7th grade going into 8th grade.
That was a pretty big decision to make at 13 years old. How long were you thinking about that?
I'd say I was thinking like that probably in like 6th grade, like going up into it, like just the little things I would notice. Like one, like my grandfather, I have some of the craziest memories with that dude. One of the most racist, vile human beings you'll ever meet. You know, same thing with like, you know, my mom was kind of that way. Like she was more open-minded, but you could tell that kind of rubbed off on her a little bit, you know, especially back in the day. And then, you know, I wasn't feeling like the life I was living at home was the same as other kids. Like I would go to other kids' houses and like I go in their home and it's really clean. You know, there's not like piles of just random stuff laying around. Like, and I was thinking like, man, like maybe this isn't like normal. Like maybe, you know, there is a problem going on. But I just knew that like, especially when like generationally, like, you know, my grandfather, he was probably brought up that way. My mom, she's been kind of stuck in her ways now, to the point where that was kind of the downfall of her relationship with my dad. I was like, I need to put myself in a different environment just to see if there's going to be a change.
That's a really mature decision, and it speaks a lot to like your experience, because we talk a lot when we talk about like maturity. I don't think it has a lot to do, and this is just my opinion, I don't think it has a lot to do with your age or who raised you, but rather your experience. Because I think like ultimately you could have like the most ignorant parents in the world. You could have you could be in your teens, but when you see enough, right? Like when you said you went out, I think that's like another way of really seeing, like experiencing, is to go out and do the adventure thing of go and see other people's houses, go and see how other people live. Because it's interesting that you say that that's how you realized, hey, maybe something's different here. Maybe something's not right. Maybe I'm not in the right environment, because that's how a lot of people who do get out there become experienced, as they see other people and they go, wait a minute, that guy, this is very different than my house. Definitely. And so yeah, that's a really big decision. And so then you move in. Do you contact your dad? How does this happen?
So my dad, I mean, growing up, like I'd see him every once in a while. You know, he would pick me up and like do homework with me or something, or I'd go over by his place for a weekend or something like that. And I had his number. I had a cell phone all growing up. And one day I was over at his place actually, and I was sitting in the kitchen, and like my dad and Kim were just kind of around, and I asked him like, hey, would you be okay with me like moving in, like, you know, this upcoming school year? And they were both like just kind of very surprised, because they knew how much I loved living in Chicago. Like, right. You know, they knew the suburbs were just not my vibe, but they obviously said, yes, like, of course you can, you know what I mean? Like, we could set it up. Like, obviously you need to talk to your mom and stuff like that, and we need to have a conversation. But if that's really what you want to do, we can help you.
What was was it difficult for you, or was it something that you're like, no, I've thought about and I'm happy with that decision?
I was 100% on the decision until my dad came to pick me up.
What happened?
Like, dude, like just my friends were there, like to say hi to me and stuff. Like, you know, and it's just one of those things you can't really explain, bro. Like when I walk onto Quinn Street, like doesn't matter how long it's been, dude, like that's my home. That's my neighborhood. Right. You know, being a Chicagoan, like there's a lot of culture that goes into like where we come from. And, you know, Bridgeport started out in the Chicago stockyards, bro. Like immigrant families, like a lot of crazy shit going on back in the day. But, you know, it built the foundation of that neighborhood, you know, this melting pot of people who came here for a better opportunity for themselves. And I've always like taken pride in that. So thinking of leaving that behind, I was like, that's crazy. Like, is this the right move? You know? Yeah. And, you know, I just had that moment where I was like, I got to do it. And my mom, she even kind of said it. she was kind of like, this is what's best for you. Like, go do it. Like, I'll be here, you know? So even my mom, like, that's like I said, like, she's always been a little bit more self-aware and kind of more open-minded. And it was a hard pill for her to swallow, but she knew that, like, me staying at home, it was going to be harder for her, you know, having another kid there and stuff. But she also knew it was going to be what was best for me in the long run.
And so, yeah, so then do you still keep in touch with any of your friends from Chicago?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. See them on Facebook, Instagram, stuff like that. Definitely keep in touch. I mean, we're all kind of living different lives. You know what I mean? Growing up throughout high school, I was definitely always still going back, always hanging out with the friends from back in the day and stuff. So definitely, I mean, but then, you know, sometimes that's how it goes after high school. You do college or whatever else you do, and you kind of drift away, but you still hit each other up every once in a while, run into each other somewhere. So definitely.
And so then what was it like once you move in with your dad? What's going on? Like, what are the conversations about? Like, because you don't really know your dad at this point, right?
Yeah, not really.
So there's got to be an awkward amount of time before you guys get comfortable. What happens?
Oh, definitely. I mean, 8th grade was a nightmarish year. He was convinced that I was just out to get him. Like, and in a way, like, I did kind of view him as my enemy for a little bit. Like, he was always trying to, like, impose his authority on me. And, you know, especially, like, my mom was super lenient, all that. I was not for that. But my stepmom was always one of my biggest supporters. Like, she knew that I was just, like, you know, a kid who liked what he liked, just trying to, you know, figure out life, I guess you could say. So I was always talking to her. And I remember, like, this is to the extent it was, man. Like, so we lived in the time in a condo before we moved into our house in Oak Forest. It was in Chicago Ridge. And we lived on the 3rd floor. So in the summer, man, it'd be hot, bro.
Yeah.
And at night, in my room, we had 2 air conditioners, one in the living room, one in my dad's room. Mine did not have an air conditioner. I had this little fan. And it was so hot in there at night, I couldn't sleep in there. So I would go into the living room and sleep on the couch. And my dad was convinced that I was doing it just to piss him off. And like, oh, like, you're trying to not sleep in your bed. You're trying to get up in the middle of the night and watch TV. I'm yelling at him, you're crazy. Yeah. You sleep in there tonight. I'm sweating in there. And my stepmom would, like, laugh and be like, Dave, I think he's being serious. I think it's hot in there.
What was the integration like?
Didn't happen for a minute.
Oh, it never happened. Okay.
Never, dude. I mean, when I was in 8th grade, boom, right when Friday would hit, I was on the metro going back to the city every weekend. I would never really spend time in Chicago Ridge, you know, hang out with a lot of kids, like, from the area or anything like that, because it was just, like, it was so unattractive to me. Like, there was nothing about living in this, like, world that was attractive to me. So every weekend, boom, going downtown, probably staying at my mom's or something like that, and just hanging out with my friends and, you know, doing whatever.
So you weren't really that first 8th grade, you weren't really staying at your house, at your dad's house? You were kind of going back?
Yeah, just back and forth. I mean, obviously, like, he was okay with me seeing my mom and stuff like that, you know, hanging out with friends, but he could tell it was excessive. Like, he could tell that I was, like, kind of miserable. It was definitely, like, a hard transition because I just was growing up all throughout high school. I was never a fan of school, didn't like doing homework, didn't like authority. Just because, like, the Catholic school system, I would kind of see how, like, shady it was, and, like, you know, how, like, oh, if you're in, you know, with the church or with the school, like, oh, you're in, but if, like, we don't really know you, you're kind of on the back burner. You know what I mean? And also, like, you know, doing things, especially in 8th grade at Catholic schools, like doing your confirmation or all this other stuff, like you're writing essays to do it and all that. I would tell him, like, I'm not doing that. He understood that, like, life for me was very different. So I don't think he really held it, like, against me the way I felt about, like, everything going on. I mean, because he himself, like, he was a young kid in Chicago growing up. He understands the life and the draw and, like, how it is. Like, that's your home, you know? And he knew that, like, my mom had also kind of fed me a lot of information that made me think negatively about him, you know? So I already was, like, super on my mom's side, like, you know, my dad, like, he's this kind of guy, yada, yada, yada. And I wasn't willing to hear him out about anything because I was always like, you don't get to tell me what to do. Like, you haven't been around, like, you haven't been my dad, you know what I mean?
Well, you know, to be fair, it's also, that was also your experience, because, like, with my like I grew up with my mom, right? And so my dad wasn't really in my life either. And so like I have that as well, where I believed just, everything that I had heard about my dad. And I was like, you know what, like if you really did care, like why wouldn't you make more of an effort to like do things more on my terms, or whatever I'm requesting of you, like this is what I need of you as my dad. And why was that so difficult? And so that's something that I completely understand when you say like, I grew up with my mom, and then there was also things she told me about him that made me even dislike him more, right? Mm-hmm. But then at some point for me, it was like, okay, so, and you mentioned this too, which is interesting because like at some point, same thing happened for me where I was like, okay, and this was more recent, like what's really going on, right? Like I heard this side of the story, and this is what I experienced. So then I also want to experience this thing. Like I want to see what this is about. Was there ever like a thing where you're like, okay, let me hear this guy out?
Yeah, I would say closer like to the end of high school. I would say around there is when we started like talking a little bit more and stuff like that about like his relationship with my mom, all that kind of stuff. I mean, even to this day, like it hasn't gone like super deep. Like he's shown me like, oh no, like I did try and be there for you. Like, like how her family and stuff was like, obviously like my dad, like he's a Hispanic guy, like Martinez. And my grandfather was never really a huge fan of him. So my grandfather's kind of feed in my mom stuff and, just not a very conducive environment.
It's also a culture thing too, where at least with the males is that it's like, you don't really talk about anything that you're feeling. Like emotions are somehow a symbol of weakness to some extent, because the man is supposed to be in like a lot of cultures, right? The man is supposed to be like the strong one. And so that can be difficult. So I imagine then there wasn't ever like a conversation where it's like, hey, this is how I feel.
Not really a conversation, like so much, like very surface level. Like I think like the only like defining moment where we kind of like understood each other was probably like my junior year of high school or something like that. Like my dad was angry about something like clearly other than like the lawn not getting mowed or something like that. And he was like yelling at me like, get out there and mow the fucking lawn, like yada, yada, yada. And I'm out there doing it and I'm just like being slow about it and stuff. And he kind of like runs out there and like just like takes the lawnmower from me. And he's like, you go ahead, like you go inside. And I just look at him and I'm like, he could tell I'm like getting emotional, like I'm about to cry. And he starts crying. And then we just kind of like hugged and he said he was sorry. But that was literally like the only moment where I remember we both kind of like understood like, yo, like, we can't be doing this. Like, let's take a step back here. Like, you're my dad, I'm your kid. Let's move on from this situation. And I would say from there, like my junior year, like it was more civil and stuff. Like he was always kind of wondering, like, what are you planning on doing? Because again, at Oak Forest High School, I wasn't really great at school, wasn't really like too much into, doing well in school or even thinking about college or anything like that. So at that point in time, he was just worried, like, what is my kid going to do? Like, what is he going to end up, what path is he going to go down? Because he didn't see, the light at the end of the tunnel for me, after high school and stuff.
And well, speaking of, when you did make the move to Oak Forest, what was it like? What was the community like versus what you had?
Different, very different. That was one of like the first moments where I really saw like the cliques and stuff like that. A lot of cliques, there was a culture, but like it was almost like a lacking of culture, I guess you could say. Like, everyone kind of had like their own groups, and like I was always kind of that weird, like just kind of like I talk to everybody, but like I'm not really super close with anyone. Like I don't hang out with someone like on a regular basis. So high school, like I got along, you know what I mean? But it was definitely not like my favorite.
And I remember, because see, when I met you, now that I really sit and think about it, it was like in biology, and we had a lot of things. The things that drew us together was like the thing that draws all of my close friends together, which is like Dragon Ball Z. Yep. When were you watching that as a kid? Like what?
Oh, dude, anime was it for me back in the day. I remember being 8 years old, staying up watching Toonami, watching Naruto.
Yeah.
That was like my first. Yeah. That was like one of the first moments. Like I'm a big music listener. I'm a big, media watcher, movies, TV. And that was the first show that really like drew me and that kind of like inspired me. Like, here's this kid, like, you know, just trying to like, you know, prove everyone wrong, like, you know, show that he is going to be the Hokage or whatever. Same with Dragon Ball, man. Like trying to hit that next level, like trying to, you know, just keep getting better, you know, fuel my childhood.
I think this is something that people do talk about it, because I see it. I'll see it once in a while on. You'll see like TikTok videos of people who were inspired by anime, like to whether they're bodybuilders or whatever. Like most of the time, I see it in like bodybuilding. To be honest, like the Dragon Ball Z being an inspiration, especially with how giant those guys are. Yeah. And so, but it's interesting. It's like it kind of, that show kind of raised me. Dragon Ball Z specifically, and maybe that's the case for other people with other anime shows, but Dragon Ball Z for me was like I lived mostly with my mom growing up, but like she was working a lot, and so I didn't really see her. So in like a lot of ways, I kind of had like my brothers and I gravitated to Dragon Ball Z because that was like our parent in a way. Like there was a lot of stuff that like right and wrong of good and evil, and you get introduced into all that. And so for me, it was like, it was like that show kind of raised me in a way. Definitely. And so what was the experience like for you? You just like touched on it a little bit, but I'm curious to know a little bit more about what did you get out of that?
Oh, I got a lot out of it. I mean, looking back at some of like the biggest like defining moments in my life, in some way, like a show or something like played a role in it. Like I remember I was like, it was the night before I was getting ready to like leave for basic training and stuff like that. And I had watched Attack on Titan season 1. And lovely that show. Scene where Eren just like picks up the boulder and like plugs the hole in the wall, and like just how like determined he was like to accomplish that. Yeah. In my head, like that fueled me the entire time. I was like, dude, this is that moment for me. Like I'm picking up that boulder and plugging the wall. But definitely, I mean, a lot, man. Just learning about, you know, navigating a path, like you said, good, evil, right, wrong, played a big role.
That is such a great example, that scene of like determination, of just seeing something that like seemed impossible, and it was like we got it done because we weren't gonna not do that, right? Yep. So then growing up, was that like going to high school, let's say, because there weren't a lot of people that from that school that liked any of that. No. So what was making friends like for you at Oak Forest? Hard,
and definitely at first, at least, like here I was like, you got to think like I'm coming from, you know, kindergarten through 8th grade Catholic school, wearing a uniform all the time. Like, and then I'm being told by my parents, I can wear whatever I want to school. Man, I was wearing my anime t-shirts. I was wearing pajamas to school. Like I didn't care, you know what I mean? Like, and out there, like, you know, you gotta, you know, be wearing what's in. You gotta have, you know, you're repping sports teams, and that's what people are talking about, or something else like that, you know. And I was over here wearing my Death Note, my Naruto shirts that I picked up at Hot Topic over the weekend. Yeah, you know. So I was definitely a little bit of like a weird kid, I guess you could say.
But you know, I saw you kind of come into a class of your own, where people really liked that you were your own person.
Definitely.
At first I saw hesitation too, like where it was like, yeah, you were still trying to see like where you fit in here, but you didn't. It was one thing that I do remember very clearly is that you didn't try to like be a part of like, oh, I'm going to just be this group now. Like that was never you. Like from when the time that you came in, like you didn't just go, oh, I don't like that anymore. Because some people feel the pressure, right? There's pressure especially in high school, right, to fit in. There's a lot of pressure. But I did notice that about you, that you didn't cave. And was there pressure too?
Oh, many times I felt the pressure to kind of fit into the status quo. But like, even now, I'm just one of those people, like, I don't care who you are, I'll talk to you, I'll have a conversation with you, you know, I'd be talking to you guys about movies or anime or something, and then I'd be talking to some guys on the football team just about, you know, some other random stuff. Yeah. Talking to, you know, a little bit of the shady kids over at Smoker's Corner. Yeah. Across the street, talk to them a little bit. I don't care who you are, man. Let's have a conversation. Let's see if we vibe, you know?
Yeah. You broke those stereotype, like the boundary stereotypes of like, oh, we don't talk to this person, we don't talk to that. Yeah. And I didn't really see that in Oak Forest, other than when I talked to you, right? It's like like, I had never seen somebody who can, I'm looking for the word for it. I'd never seen somebody who could just go from group to group and it's not weird. Because, like, mind you, like, me and Nick and David talked about this. Like, we were not by any means popular kids. We were like average. Like, we were your average Joes. Like we weren't not known, but we also weren't super known. Like, if you were to ask people, like, who are we? Like, some people might be like, yeah, I know them, like, those kids or whatever. Like, but that's about as far as that would go. But, like, when I saw you, it was like, that group knew you, this group knew you, that group knew you, and they had a memory of you. So that clicks now of like, yeah, you've always just gravitated everywhere.
Dude, loved it, man. Like I said, I was into a super bunch of different stuff. Like, I was on the football team for a little bit, wrestling team for a little bit, also just like doing stuff outside of that. So, I try and get along with everyone. You know what I mean? I'm one of those people where it's like, even today, like, even if someone is living, their life or something and you don't agree with it, or, or you're not into that, fine. You know what I mean? I'm not going to judge you or anything like that. Like, you're doing you, as long as you're happy, as long as you're not hurting anyone in the process. You live your life, man. I'm going to live mine, and let's just coexist, man. Let's just keep it cool,
And did that ever was there ever a time where you had to, like, stand up for yourself and say, hey, like, I'm not going to not talk to that person? Was there ever, like, a line drawn by a group that wanted to keep you?
So an instant memory that comes back to me, like, I always remember this. So, like, senior year, I was on the football team in high school, but, like, I was never really like a starter or anything like that. Yeah. Part of it because, like, obviously it's high school football, like, coaches have their favorites and stuff. Mm-hmm. Also partly, like, I just didn't apply myself as much, as some of the other kids. So for me, a moment that I remember it was senior year, and all throughout high school, man, I always loved the guys' Palms performance, at the homecoming, at the assembly and stuff. I loved it. Yeah. And I was always saying, like, senior year, like, me and, like, a couple of the homies that I talked to, like, Anthony Bourne from back in the day and stuff, we had always talked about doing it, like, that's going to be so fun. And I remember Coach Thormeyer, we were meeting one day, and he had heard that I had signed up for Guys Palms. And he told me in front of everyone, he's like, if you do that, if you join, you're off the team. But, I mean, Anthony and a couple other kids on the team, they were doing it, but they weren't getting threatened to get kicked off the team. Mm-hmm. So I told him, I'm like, all right, take me off the team because I'm doing it. And he was like, are you serious? And everyone on the team was like, you're really going to do that? And I'm like, yeah, why do I care? It's not like I'm playing in the game or something anyway. Like, I've been wanting to do this for the past 4 years. I'm doing it. Sure enough, didn't go back to football practice for the rest of the year. I was off the team, but the Guys Palms performance, one to remember for sure. So definitely happy I did it.
Immediately, I remembered that when you said immediately as soon as you talked about Palms, I remember that it was a thing. Like, yeah. What was the problem with? Do you think with you joining? Like, why was that a thing?
Especially on the sports teams, I was always an odd one out. Like, I think it's. Again, like, I always like to play, devil's advocate. Like, one part of me, it's like I just wasn't really, like, well-liked, like, I was very talkative, like, a little bit annoying, I'd say. But I think for me, it was just like I wasn't always, like, just doing what everyone else was doing. I wasn't, like, fully applying myself, like, to be the best at it. Like, I remember when I was on the wrestling team, for example, Coach Ficht, I think he was the head coach at the time, and still might be. But at practice, he always knew that I could do it, that I was a good wrestler. Like, he would put me in the middle and send, like, 3 dudes, like, one after the other, and somehow at practice, like, I'd beat each one of them, and he'd be pissed because, like, look at what this kid is doing. Like, you guys are over here practicing, working hard, and this kid's, like, somehow, he does that to you at practice. Mm-hmm. So they would kind of, like, hold that against me. Like, you could be so good, you could do this, you could do that, but you're not applying yourself as much. And that's just who I am. Like, I put forth, like, whatever effort I wanted to, and if it wasn't enough for you, cool. Like, I'm out of here. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, that takes a lot of courage to do, of just be like, nah, I'm going to do this anyway, despite the pressure that you're putting on me. And so then I'm curious, because we're talking about what was senior year, right? Mm-hmm. At what point did you say, or did you ask yourself, what do I want to do? Because you'd been kind of going around for a while, like just here and then here and then here. Was there ever a time where you're like, what do I want to do, like going forward in the future?
That didn't really happen, I'd say, until like right after high school.
Okay.
I remember vividly back in the day, like I had applied like to some schools and gotten accepted to some schools, but I just knew that like I didn't have the grades to like get like, a scholarship or like make it, worth it. And my dad, like he was one of those guys, like you haven't really put forth like your best effort. Like, why am I going to pay tens of thousands of dollars to send you to school when you haven't shown me that like you're going to take it seriously? I was like, capiche, like I get it. That's valid. And for me, I think leaving high school, my dad and we got into a huge fight. Like out of high school, I was working like, part-time, and he wanted to like put some of my money to the side, like to save it, for, getting a car so I can like go to community college or something like that. And I got pissed. I told him like, you're not touching my money. Like that's my money. And he was like, we were getting in an argument. I said, I'm moving back in with my mom. So I packed up my stuff, left, and living back at my mom's place for a little bit. I was living in the basement at the time. And I just remember that moment again, like, similar to like the one in 8th grade. I was like, man, if I don't figure something out, I'm going to be stuck here. Yeah. I gotta get out. I gotta do something. So that's when the idea just kind of popped into my head, like maybe I should join the military, So that was when I was like, let me see what I need to do to kind of see if that path is the right one.
And so then what there's a difference in what you think is going to happen, and then when you actually get there in terms of like your experience of what you think is going to be like. Did you reach out to a recruiter, or did a recruiter reach out to you?
I reached out to one. I took the CTA, took a train and a bus to a recruiting station on the north side, went in there, started talking to them like about the process and everything. But obviously, like I said, I was a little bit of a bigger kid back then. Mm-hmm. So they said the biggest obstacle for me was going to be getting, down to like where my tape is going to be good. Yeah. Because I had told them, I'm like, I think the max weight before you didn't get taped at the time was like 189. For like my height. And I told him like, I've never weighed 189 in my life. Like that's not going to happen. And just that process of like, wrapping my body in foil or like, plastic wrap, starving myself, like running every single day of like, just to like shed my body down. Yeah. That process was absolutely grueling. It was like breaking, because I knew I was just like doing stuff that wasn't like normally who I am. But in my head, I was always just kind of like, I need to keep going. I need to make this work. And especially in the recruiter's eyes, they're just trying to get you in there and get you going. You know what I mean? They need to hit their quota too. So there was some conversation with them about what the process was going to be like, what the journey was going to be like, but it was never really like crystal clear until like I actually got there.
Was the Army the thing that you wanted to do, like, or did you have to look around for a little bit?
I didn't do any research at all, man. I'll be honest. I remember I took the ASVAB, like that like test you take before you go in and all that kind of stuff. And I remember I had scored really high. I don't remember exactly what the score was, but they were like, you could pretty much have any job you want. And I remember I was sitting in the recruiter's office. I'm like, man, I wonder what I should do. And this guy sitting in there, he goes, you should be a combat engineer. And I'm like, combat engineer? What's that? He goes, man, 12 Bravo, you blow shit up with C4 explosives. Like, It's fun. Yeah. It's fun. You do that kind of stuff. You're out in the field with the guys camping. I'm hearing that, and I'm like, all right, this sounds a little bit different, but it sounds pretty cool. Signed the paper right there. I said, all right, that's what I want to do. And everyone was like, you're sure? I was like, yeah, why not, right? It's 3 years. Yeah, let's do it. Sign the paper.
So what ends up happening, right? How long before you ship off to boot camp?
So I had ended up shipping out like that, like fall, like around after high school, like around there. And that was just like a crazy journey. Like I live for those like kind of like cultural experiences, but man, when you get in there, man, it is just a culture shock unlike any other. My recruiter didn't help me at all either. He didn't tell me I needed to bring a razor or any of the like, necessary like things. Like when you first get there, I'm thinking like, oh, I'm going to get all this stuff, they're going to give it to me right when I get there, Yeah. I'm getting smoked for not having a razor. People are yelling at me like, blah, 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 blah. Meeting all these different people from all these different places. Man, that was a crazy experience.
I'm surprised that you weren't provided that. When I went to boot camp, there was, it was a bad razor, but it was a razor that they gave us.
Yeah. Like when we had gotten there, like initially when we got there, we didn't go to like the shop ed or anything to like pick stuff up. So like we ended up going after like the first 3 days, I think, like after we were doing all of our medical stuff and stuff like that. But I never really like knew like, oh, I need to like bring this stuff. And it was weird, definitely.
Now that I think about it, maybe we also did have to bring it because we didn't get our debit cards.
Yes.
For a little bit. So maybe you're right. Maybe I did have to bring one, but that's crazy. Yeah, that's something that you forget, or at least they should have told you.
Yeah, it should have done. Yeah. Whatever, man. I look back at it. It was funny now.
Right. Yeah. In hindsight. And then, so then what was your you said you didn't really do much research on what boot camp was like, right?
Yeah, not really.
Because I sat down and watched a ton of videos, and I thought I was going to be ready. Like I thought that was going to be, let me tell you, dude, you didn't miss out much. Like it's not going to, it didn't change anything. I just knew what was going to happen in certain parts of like, oh, now we're going to get, messed with the whole day. Like that's about as much as I knew, but it actually didn't help me get any better at not getting caught doing stuff. Like it was just as bad.
Definitely.
And so then what are your drill sergeants like?
Drill sergeants, back in the day, our guy, Drill Sergeant Kavanaugh, he was the one for our company. Crazy dude. He had these like light blue eyes that just like pierced right through you. There was another one, Drill Sergeant Hernandez. He was a weird guy. He was a cool guy, but a weird guy, man. Like he was like, he was gay. He was into dudes and stuff. And like, he was always like the one like drill sergeant who like would talk to us like we were normal and stuff. Like, he would like, we'd be out in the field and he'd tell us like, a story around the campfire or something like that, or, some lesson like that, like, something he learned in life. And honestly, like my company specifically, like my platoon, they were really cool. So, I look back at it, we had to do a lot of, crazy stuff, getting caught stealing Nutri-Grain bars, all that kind of stuff. But it was an experience. Like I'm one of those dudes. I live for an experience. Like it's like you said with the videos and stuff. Like I don't like watching videos on movies and stuff before I watch them. I guess for that experience, I was like, let me just really take it full force and just see what it's about.
Well, it speaks to your character. You just like to get in there and figure it out. I can respect that. And so then, what's interesting with drill instructors drill sergeants in your case, is that there's like, for me, like I had a thing about like with authority, right? Like I feared authority for most of my life. With you didn't like authority. So how did that work?
To be completely honest, like throughout the whole process, like I knew like, okay, like these dudes own me. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like they're going to make me do whatever I want. I'm not going to get away with anything. For me, I was just always saying to myself, like, you're doing this for a reason. Like it's hard. Like I saw people drop out. I saw people, want to go back home. Like I saw all that. But for me, I was like, I have a great opportunity. Like I have an opportunity to get a free education. I have an opportunity to travel the world and, live in a whole different place. So I just wanted to get through it. For me, like basic, like in a lot of ways, like it didn't really prepare me for like what the real, Army was like. I feel like basic is like what everyone thinks the military is like. And like, but when you actually get there and you're behind the veil and you see what it really is, it's literally like a whole different world, that you step into.
I'm really glad that you say it that way, because that's something that is hard to explain to a lot of people that see the military from the outside. Oh yeah, is that it's literally a different planet. Like it's so separate from society that these bases literally can live. Like they're separated in their own, like they have their own stores, their own grocery stores. It's their own cities. Like entire cultures that are separated from the rest of the surrounding culture wherever the base is at. And so then when, like for me, when I try to explain this to people, that it's like the lingo is different. You talk differently, so that some people, you can have entire conversations with someone from some of your buddies in the military, and then someone from back home, I don't know what you just said. Like, it's literally like its own separate lingo, its own culture. So then, what was it like graduating? Was there, for me, when I graduated boot camp, or when I got my Eagle Globe and Anchor specifically, when we became Marines, when training was, that's like the culmination of training. For me, it was like that was one of those things where when I went to boot camp, it was like, can I do that? And then you do it, and it's like, I can. So then what else am I able to do? What was the experience like for you?
I can't honestly say I looked that deep into it at the end. Like, for me, I was just like, I was always like, what's next? But I also knew, like, just, from what my drill sergeants and stuff had told me, like, what you're doing is completely different than what's going to come next. You know what I mean? Like, they would have these moments where, like, they would take their hats off and stuff, and they'd be like, all right, for the next 10 minutes, like, you can ask us questions, and, like, we'll just, like, talk to you like, we're our regular selves. And, you had a lot of kids who would go in there and stuff, and, like, they were expecting, like, the military to be like what you see in the movies. You know what I mean? But they had to realize that, like, it's a very different, world, and some people were disappointed by that. Some people, it was just different for everyone.
The thing that bothered me was, and it's one of the things that also turned me off from staying in, was so these are your guys, right? Like, what are you investing to try to help them, to try to figure out, to help them stay in? Because that should be your role, right? As leadership is to retain, right? And so my biggest bother was, we had a guy that, and I think of him now, that I was very bothered by how he was managed, and I felt so, and this isn't just like, oh, look at me. It's one of those things where I was so upset with, like, the fact that nothing was being done to help him, that I was like, hey, come and meet me. Like, let's get together like once a week or twice a week. Let's do some workouts together to see if we can't figure out, like, what it is that we can do that's not going to, like, destroy you, to, help you lose some weight. Right. And, ultimately, like, I didn't know a ton either about, like, the proper way to do it, because I hadn't had that issue. I didn't, he had a thing with his metabolism. This is another hard thing to do. Like, if you have a slower metabolism, and, like, everybody's bodies are different. Right. And so, but there was that of, like, we want to help you. Like, there wasn't that from my unit. And I was very upset about that, because he was such a great Marine. Like, he knew everything. He knew how to do the radios. He knew how to set everything, because we were radios. And so he knew how to set everything up. He taught people how to do the stuff. He was such a great asset to the unit, right? The only issue was that he was struggling with his weight. And it was just like, well, you suck. Like, that's ultimately what it came. It's like, did you forget all of what he did for this unit? Did you forget all of the things that he taught people? Did you forget how useful he is to this unit? And it felt like that. It felt like they just threw that out.
Definitely.
That was my biggest problem. Did you get, I don't want to assume, did they do anything to help you?
They did in some ways. Like, everyone saw that I had, like, a good work ethic. Like, it's like I told you, when I was getting ready to come in, like, I was running all the time, and me being a bigger dude, like, they were surprised that I was always running, like, up in the front with everyone else, like, leading, like, company runs and stuff like that. When we were doing, like, field stuff in the missions, they could tell, like, I wasn't fully invested in reading the manuals or, like, any of that kind of stuff. But, like, when we were doing stuff, like, boom, I'm there. Let's do it. Mm-hmm. And some of my leadership admired that about me. Like, I still remember to this day, like, they had taped me and I failed my tape. They were like, you need to pass within, like, this amount of time. And they saw that I was, like, eating clean, working out heavy in my free time. And my platoon sergeant at the time, this guy, Sergeant Pareto, he's, like, your textbook, like, Army dude, man. Like, big, like, Native Islander looking dude with some tits that he got in Iraq or something like that. And, like, he's a hard ass, man, but, like, he's one of those dudes, like, he rides for his guys. And he saw how hard I was working, like, how like, kind of, like, broken I was, like, going, like, this far against myself. And he taped me, and I failed, but he, like, tightened it around me, like, and everyone in the room knew, like, when they were watching it, like, okay, like, yeah, this isn't what's supposed to happen, but like Martinez, he deserves it. You know what I mean? So like, boom, he passed. That bought me another 6 months, like, before I had to do it again at the next PT test. Like, okay, boom, you're good for right now, but make sure you keep working. You know, again, when, you know, I had about, you know, 2 years left, they're getting ready to go to Asia. Originally, I wasn't supposed to go to Thailand, Korea, the Philippines, but they knew that if I stayed homebound, it was going to be a lot easier for them to chapter me out. So what they did was they were like, Martinez, this person isn't able to go, you're going. And I was like surprised. I was like, what? Like, why do I have to go? Like, I had all these plans for like Christmas, stuff like that. They were like, trust me, like, this is what you need to do. You know what I mean? So they definitely kind of helped me behind the scenes, even though up front, like, I was getting a lot of shit and like all that, but deep within, they were helping me out.
And so then, was there ever a conversation about, hey, do you think you're going to stay in?
Definitely. I mean, when I was in Korea, I was thinking about reclassing to like, you know, helicopters, like doing stuff like helicopter mechanic, something like that, just something to get me out of the field as much. But I just had that feeling. I was like, you know, this isn't for me. Like, this isn't the culture I want to be in. You know, I'm thankful for all the adventures I've had, the people I met along the way, but I want to go back home. I wanted to come back to Chicago.
And what did you end up doing once you got home? What was the plan for you?
Man, live life to the fullest, man. I right before I had left for Asia, met my fiance, love of my life. Her name's Sam. She's been with me through some of the hardest parts of my life, man. I mean, those last couple of years I was in the military were just really challenging mentally. You know, she could tell that I was still trying to figure out who I was. Like, when we met, like, I was 21, she was 18. We were both so young, and, you know, we're still together to this day, and we've seen each other evolve and like go through all these changes, and we're still in each other's corner at the end of it all. And like, when I moved back home, like, my goal was like, I want to experience life with her. I want us to go on adventures because, you know, she's originally from like the kind of Lombard area, you know, grew up like being raised by a single mom because her father had passed away, and, you know, didn't really have the best cards dealt to her in life like that. And for me, like, I just wanted to kind of like show her, like, you know, you can accomplish anything you want, and I want to take you, you know, on a little bit of a journey in life. So moved back home. I mean, I started going to school at Roosevelt University. I ended up graduating from there. I got my bachelor's in marketing, but during that time I was in school, I mean, my fiance, we were traveling to a lot of festivals, seeing a lot of live music, and just having a really good time. So that was my main goal, coming back home, just doing school and just having a good time.
What did you end up, what was your interest for college? What were you looking to do?
Marketing. So, you know, like I said, I'm a talkative guy. I like interacting with people, you know, wheeling and dealing, you know, selling stuff that I'm invested in, that I believe in, and, you know, just growing businesses, stuff like that. So helping people out where I can help, and also just like, you know, marketing myself and stuff like that. So it was cool. I enjoy it, definitely.
And it's something you still actively do, I imagine? Yeah,
I'm a branch manager for Sherwin-Williams, so sell paint, you know what I mean?
Okay.
Helping contractors grow their businesses, growing, you know, the business itself as well. So it's definitely a good first job out of school. Don't know if it's something I'm going to stick with like for the long haul. Definitely something I'm passionate about. My first passion when I got out of the military, though, was working in live music. That's what I really wanted to do.
And so where do you see yourself in the future?
You know, still figuring out. I mean, right now I am like, you know, moving up in the company and stuff like that, which is great. You know, I've been interviewing for like some promotions and stuff like that, but definitely just, you know, kind of seeing where things go. I'm never against new opportunities and stuff, you know what I mean? So I'm always kind of looking for, you know, what's next, like what's the next plateau that I can reach.
Yeah. I mean, there's always such a large ceiling, and you don't even know what you're capable of till you've already experienced. Just dive in and see what's there. And so then we are getting close on time. So I do want to wrap things up a little bit. I did want to ask you a few questions that I ask all of my guests.
Please.
And
we have some time.
What do you have going on right now, and anything that you'd like to share with anybody watching?
Man, what do I have going on right now? Well, coming back this year. So last year, my buddy and I, Jacob, we started a podcast called Shiesty Boys.
Okay.
Like Shiesty, but CHI, Chicago. So
okay.
Jacob and I, like, we just have a cool story. Like, my fiance, Sam, she used to be best friends with this one girl that Jacob used to date. And that's how Jacob and I met, quote unquote.
Yeah.
One day we were out at a concert, right? And, we were having some fun. I was having a good time myself that night. And I was walking up to the bar at this place, Concord Music Hall in Chicago. And I'm walking around this bar and I see one of my childhood friends, David Baker, standing there. And I go up to him and I say, "What's up, man?" And Jacob, he turns and he goes, "Oh, what's up, David?" And I'm like, "Wait, you know David?" And then he's like, "Oh, you mean Cubby?" And I find out, bro, that Jacob lived in Bridgeport until he was like 6 years old. I went over to Jacob's house that exact weekend, and his mom looks at me and goes, "David, were you on the Arizona Diamondbacks baseball team back at McGuane Park?" I was like, "Yeah." She goes, "Your mom's boyfriend was the coach, right?" "Yeah." She shows me a team picture. Jacob and I were on the same team.
Wow.
Growing up, had no idea. So we thought that would be kind of a great building block to kind of start our own podcast. We love talking about Bears football and that kind of stuff. So we took a break this past year, but this year, like towards the end of the summer, we're going to be bringing Shiesty Boys back. Shiesty Boys on Instagram podcast. So stay tuned for that.
Awesome. Yeah. I appreciate you sharing. And then I did want to ask you, if you could speak to your childhood self, what would you say?
Man, you're going to make it. You're going to make it. Growing up, I realize now, like, I've definitely dealt with anxiety, throughout my life, from my childhood living with my mom, and like that uncertainty, it always stressed me out. I was always so worried about it. And, even throughout high school, I was worried, like, am I going to make it? Like, am I going to make myself proud? Am I going to make my family proud? I would just look at my younger self and be like, "Hey, dude, like, don't take it too seriously." People like to try and make it seem like, especially here in America, you got to live in this, bubble. And like, this is kind of that like preconceived path that's like, the way you're supposed to go. But at the same time, like, you can accomplish anything you want. So like, whatever makes you happy, keep doing it, and just know that like, it's going to be okay.
Thank you. And last but not least, have you discovered purpose in life? And if you haven't, what do you think it might be?
Definitely have. I mean, for me, purpose is being happy. You know what I mean? Like, at the end of the day, like, you can have all the goals that you want, you could have all the aspirations you want, but like, if you're not happy, like, if you don't have like people around you to like share that with, it's not worth anything at the end of the day. So like, my purpose in life has definitely just been like to wake up every day and just like know that like I'm happy, with my life. Like, I don't feel like, I always have to worry about like what that next thing is. You know what I mean? Like, sure, I want it, but at the end of the day, like, I have my fiance, I have a great relationship with, my dad and stuff right now. And I have a great group of friends around me. Here I am talking to you, someone I haven't talked to in years, and that's really cool. You know what I mean? So just my purpose in life is just taking every day for the best it can be and just making the most every day.
Dave, I really appreciate you joining us tonight. It's been such a great talk, and I know there's more to talk about for us in the future, and I'd love to see where you go. So this isn't the last time we'll have you on.
Support these guys, man. It was a great show.
Thank you so much.